This video covers part of the content for the Cloud APIs virtual event, which is all about using APIs on SAP Cloud Platform. The content is available on GitHub, and this particular video covers the content for exercise 4, creating a workflow service instance and deploying a definition. This exercise is within the group of exercises called Learning with the Workflow API. So let's get started. In this exercise, we're just going to finish setting up so that we can make some workflow API calls. We need to make calls on something, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to create that something. So we're going to create a workflow service instance. We're going to create a service key for the service instance, which will contain important information for our Ex.04 2.0 adventures. And we're going to then deploy a very, very simple workflow definition to it. Okay, so in the first step, we're going to create a workflow service instance. All the work we do here in this exercise is going to be in the Business Application Studio. So let's just flip over here. I've already got the App Studio dev space up and running. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a workflow service instance. And of course, these instructions assume that you've created your trial account freshly and you don't already have a workflow service instance running. If you do and you want to reuse that, you can do. Just adapt these instructions accordingly, or you can remove it if you don't need it anymore, and let's create a new one together. Okay, so we want to make sure, like before, we're working in the workspace API directory. Let's open up a terminal. As normal, I'm going to use the shortcut control backtick, and in that terminal, we're already placed in the projects directory. So I can just move to the Cloud APIs virtual events workspaces workflow API. Now the instruction here again is absolute, so you could, if you wanted to, cd $home, which will sort of reset the root of the path to our home directory /user/home projects cloud and so on. Okay, but we're already here, so let's just carry on. Alternatively, the App Studio has a really nice feature where we can say, okay, there's the directory we want to be in, Workflow API, right click, open in terminal. Okay, so there's a new terminal that's just been opened for me in that particular directory. But we're already there, so I'm going to use that one instead. Okay, so we start in the Workflow API directory. So the first thing to do is to make sure that we're using the values, the shared values for our different aspects. So if we have a look inside of the Workflow API directory, we see we've got this shared file here. And that shared file contains values for variables like the name of the service, the name of the plan that we want to create an instance of that service with, the name we're going to give our service key, and so on. And we're also then constructing other names based upon these values here. So the instance name of the service, the instance of the service itself is going to be workflow-light in this case. This is the value of the service variable and the value of the plan variable, and the key file where we're going to place the service key itself when we download it is going to be in a file called workflow-sk1 JSON. Okay, so let's continue with that now. So the first thing we need to do in our terminal is to use the source command to bring in the values, to basically execute this file so that we have access to, for example, the $plan variable, echo service, and so on. Okay, so now we have this, we can sort of safely run these commands all together and we'll all have the same values. So we're going to create an instance of the workflow service. Okay, so let's just use this command here, and as you can see, this command is making use of these variables, so workflow light and sk1. You could just type directly workflow light and sk1, but this is a nice way of being consistent. And so what's going to happen is that we're going to have an instance of the workflow service created for us using the light plan in our Cloud Foundry dev. Okay, so we get a message that the create is in progress, and we're told to use the cf services command, or cf service workflow light in our particular case, to check the operational status. Let's just remove the Explorer column for a second, make this a little bit bigger so we can see a little bit more of what's going on. What does that mean? Well, basically it means that the creation process is asynchronous. Okay, so now if we say cf service $instance, which of course will resolve to the instance name, we can have a look at the info. And as we can see, it's telling us that the create is in progress. So we can keep checking that. Okay, we need to be a little bit patient. We can keep checking that to see. By the way, there is a watch command available in the shell. It's a standard Unix command, standard Linux command, and we can say watch every 5 seconds CF service workflow light, for example, and that will watch and run this command and display the output on the screen. Oh, okay, well, that was pretty quick. The creation has now succeeded. So the watch will continue until we cancel that. So that's a good thing to know for the future. Right, so we've now got a service instance. It's time now to create a service key for the service instance. As it says here, the service key contains credentials that we'll need in OAuth 2 in the flow that we're going to use with client credentials grant type later. Now, if we just grab the service key with the CF command, we get some extraneous output that we don't really want. So we need to strip that output off before downloading it and having it in a file locally here in our dev space. We've got a file called setup service key, and this will do all this for us. So that's the reference to this setup service key script here. You can see here that the setup service key is a very, very simple shell script. It will source these variables again. It will use a CF command to create a service key for the given instance, workflow light, and for the given key, i.e. give it a name, SK1 in this case, because of course the shared value key is SK1. And then once it's done that, it will use the CF service key to display the contents of the service key that it just previously created. And then it will strip off the first 2 lines and save it to the file, the key file, which we're calling the name of the instance and the name of the key. So workflow light sk1.json. And then we're using JQ, the tool that we installed in a previous exercise, just to display the contents of that key file in a pretty way. Okay, so let's run that. In fact, to understand what this bit does here and why we need this bit, why don't we run the CF service key $instance $key separately. In fact, let's run them all separately. You can run this all as one when you get to it, but let's run this separately. If we say now CF, let's make sure we source the shared variables. I think we've already still got them. And now we say CF create service key $instance $key. Now the double quotes here, if you're just curious, are the proper way of referring to variables in shell scripts, but actually we know right now that there's no white space in the values for these variables, so I can just use them like this for now. Let's remove the Explorer column again. Okay, so creating service key SK1, okay, that's great. And now if we just run this bit here, CF service key instance key, let's see what we get. Let's move this right up here. We get a service key, but at the top of the service key, we get these 2 lines here, which are not JSON and will mess up any sort of attempt to treat that as JSON. So that's what these 2 lines are doing. That's what these that's what this command is doing here, using the stream editor to just delete the first 2 lines before redirecting the output, the JSON that is as a result of this, to a key file. Okay, so we can actually run this. These commands are very, very, very stable and robust. So we can run this again, set up service key. We can run the whole thing. It will just tell us we've already got a service key SK1. That's great. And now what's happened is that this is the output, the prettified output, as in the colored output from the JSON using JQ. Of course, we've got the file locally, so we could just have a look. There's the file there. We could just have a look in the App Studio itself, and that will also display it in a really nice way. Let's just remove the minimap so we can see a little bit more on the right hand side. So there we go. So we've got our service key. We've got details in that service key that we'll be needing in subsequent exercises. So we're all set. Okay, and the final thing to do in this step is to deploy a workflow definition. We've got a service instance of the workflow service. We've got a service key that we can use for OAuth, but also let's have a workflow definition that we can then manipulate and start creating instances of in subsequent exercises using the API. So inside of the project here, inside of the directory, Workspaces Workflow API, we've got this workflow project folder, which contains an MTA project. Okay, if you're interested in more about the MTA project, you can refer to another virtual event, which is on SAP Cloud Platform Workflow, and that will tell you a little bit more about how the whole thing is structured. But basically here we've got a workflow project, which is an MTA project, which has its own MTA YAML file. Inside there's a single module, workflow module. And in that workflow module, we've got a workflow definition. If we open that up, we can see, and I think we saw this in a previous exercise very briefly, we can see that we've got our workflow definition, which is a really simple definition. It starts and then it ends immediately. But that's enough for us to have to manipulate something with the API. So what we'll do is we'll build this MTA project and then deploy it to our service instance. Let's move into the workflow project directory. And let's have a quick look. We can see we've got the MTA YAML file and the workflow module, so that we're in the right place, okay, to build that module. We could have CD'd using the absolute path here, but we knew where we were. We were in Workflow API. We just needed to move one further down into the workflow project directory. So if we run the standard build tool, MBT build, and that build tool is accessible to us because we chose the MTA tools extension when we created this dev space. We've now got inside a new MTA archives directory, the workflow project 001.mtar, the deployable module. So now we can deploy that just by this command here. So cf deploy MTA archives workflow project 001.mtar. Let's just close that again. Let's bring that up so we can see what's happening a little bit more together, and we'll deploy it. Okay, so that's deployed now, and we should see something very similar to this, which we do over here. And that's it for this exercise. We've now got a workflow definition in the instance of the workflow service in our Cloud Foundry dev space. Let's just move back to where we were. cd ... means move back up one directory level, and let's just also get it to tell us where we are. Yeah, we're now back in the workflow API directory. So that's it. Now at this point, we're ready to continue with the subsequent exercises in this group. We've got our own workflow environment and workspace within which to explore the workflow API. Great. Thanks for watching.